Close your eyes and imagine a time long before marble columns, conquering legions, and imperial splendor before Rome became Rome. We begin not with hard facts, but with whispers of legend and fragments of truth, woven together like a tapestry passed down through generations. According to Roman tradition, twin brothers were born, Romulus and Remus. Their mother, Rhea Silvia, was a Vestal virgin, and their father was said to be Mars, the god of war himself. A jealous king, fearing what these divine sons might become, ordered them to be drowned in the river Tiber. But the river, as if aware of its own destiny, carried the infants gently downstream. Their cradle came to rest at the base of the Palatine Hill, where a she-wolf discovered them. Instead of harm, she offered nurture, warm milk, and protection beneath her fur. Later, a kind shepherd named Faustulus took the boys in and raised them as his own. They grew strong, clever, and full of fire, destined for more than a shepherd's life. Eventually, they learned of their royal blood and decided to found a new city, right there by the river that had spared them. But the brothers disagreed on where it should stand. Words turned to quarrels. Quarrels turned to tragedy. Romulus, in a fit of fury or fate, killed Remus. And so, the city was born in blood. Romulus became its first king. Standing atop the Palatine Hill, he marked its borders with a plow and declared its founding in the year we now know as 753 BCE. It was the beginning of something far greater than anyone could have imagined. At first, Rome was just a cluster of huts, humble, vulnerable, and surrounded by powerful neighbors. Etruscans to the north, Greeks to the south. To grow, Romulus opened the city's gates to outcasts and exiles, granting asylum to anyone seeking a fresh start. But this bold openness led to a problem. There were few women. To solve it, Romulus invited the nearby Sabines to a grand festival. When the revelry was at its peak, the Romans seized the Sabine women to become their wives, an act remembered as both brutal and foundational, the infamous rape of the Sabine women. From that chaotic start, Rome was ruled by kings, 7 in total, each shaping the city in their own way. After Romulus came Numa Pompilius, wise and gentle. He gave Rome its spiritual backbone, introducing religious rites, rituals, and the sacred role of the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. Then came Tullus Hostilius, a warrior king whose ambition led to the destruction of Alba Longa. Under his reign, Rome absorbed neighboring peoples, not with kindness, but with conquest. Yet, even in violence, Rome grew stronger. Ancus Marcius followed, building the first bridge across the Tiber and founding the port city of Ostia, opening trade to the sea and bringing new wealth into Rome's orbit. Then arrived a foreigner, Tarquinius Priscus, of Etruscan blood. He brought grandeur to Rome, laying the foundations of the Circus Maximus and the Temple of Jupiter. Under his rule, the muddy valleys between hills began transforming into public spaces, into the Roman Forum. His successor, Servius Tullius, gave Rome its first written constitution. Citizens were organized not by birth, but by wealth and duty. A new kind of society, where service in the army and civic life were one and the same. He even built the first walls around all 7 hills of Rome, protecting the heart of a growing city. But then came the last king, Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud. He was ambitious, ruthless, and arrogant. He ruled with fear, not favor. But what ended his reign was not his cruelty. It was his son. When Sextus Tarquinius violated Lucretia, a noblewoman of Rome, her tragic fate ignited a revolution. Lucius Junius Brutus, a name that would echo through history, led the rebellion. And in 509 BCE, the kings were cast out. The monarchy fell. The republic was born. A city once ruled by blood and gods, now turned to law and order. Not yet an empire, not yet eternal, but already unmistakably Roman. As you relax deeper into rest, imagine those early Romans, farmers and warriors, priests and builders, living beneath the stars by the river Tiber. Their tools were simple, their hopes were immense. They could not have known that their small settlement, born from myth and shaped by kings, would one day command the known world. But tonight, in the quiet of these first centuries, Rome is still just beginning. A heartbeat, a flicker of something timeless. The kings were gone, their palaces emptied, their names erased, their statues pulled from the forum. In their place, a new idea emerged. Something radical in a world of monarchs and empires. The Republic. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't peaceful, but it was Roman. Power now rested not in a single man, but in a delicate balance of roles and responsibilities. 2 consuls, elected each year, would lead the Republic together, equal in authority, each able to veto the other's decisions. Behind them stood the Senate, a council of elders drawn from Rome's noble families, the patricians. Their word was law in all but name. But Rome's early republic was a city divided. Most of the population, farmers, soldiers, merchants, were plebeians, excluded from the halls of power, their voices ignored. These were the people who built Rome's walls and fought her wars, yet they had no real say in her future. Tensions rose like the summer heat, and then something extraordinary happened. The plebeians walked out. They left their homes, their fields, and their duties, and marched to a hill outside the city, refusing to return until their rights were recognized. It was the first recorded general strike in human history, and it worked. To restore order, the Senate created a new role, tribune of the plebs. These officials, elected by plebeians, had the power to veto laws and protect the people from injustice. Harming a tribune became a crime, punishable by death. The Republic was learning to bend before it could break. Soon after came another milestone, the 12 Tables. For the first time, Roman laws were written down, carved into bronze and displayed in the forum. No longer could the elite twist custom to their will. The law belonged to all Romans now, or at least to more of them than before. And still Rome grew. Through battle and alliance, she expanded across the Italian peninsula. Neighboring tribes fell or joined. The Volsci, the Sabines, the Etruscans. The city that once feared its neighbors now began to dominate them. But victory came with loss. In 390 BCE, Celtic tribes from the north, the Gauls, descended upon Rome. They crushed the Roman army at the river Allia and marched into the city. Most of Rome was burned to the ground. Only the Capitoline Hill, defended by desperate Romans and sacred geese, was spared. The trauma scarred Rome's memory for centuries. Never again, they vowed. And so the Romans rebuilt, stronger, higher, wider. New walls surrounded the city, and Rome's ambition hardened into resolve. The Republic also evolved. A new law required at least one consul to be a plebeian, a dramatic shift in who could hold power. Over time, plebeians gained access to most offices and religious roles. Rome became slowly and imperfectly more inclusive, but equality was not the same as peace. New enemies rose. The Samnites, fierce mountain warriors, fought Rome in 3 brutal wars. Though the battles were long and costly, Rome's discipline, organization, and roads helped secure victory. And then came the Greeks of southern Italy, sophisticated, wealthy, connected to the world beyond. When the city of Tarentum felt threatened by Rome's advance, it called for help from across the sea. Enter Pyrrhus of Epirus, a Greek king with war elephants, veteran soldiers, and ambition to match Rome's own. His army shocked the Romans. His elephants trampled their formations. He won battle after battle, but each victory came at a terrible cost. His army dwindled, his allies faltered, and so Pyrrhus retreated, leaving the Greek cities to face Rome alone. One by one, they surrendered. By the mid-3rd century BCE, Rome controlled nearly the entire Italian peninsula. But what made Rome different was how she ruled. Instead of crushing the conquered, she made them partners. Some were granted full citizenship, others partial rights. A mosaic of alliances was formed, each bound to Rome, each contributing soldiers and support. This was the quiet genius of the Republic, to conquer not just with swords, but with systems. As you settle deeper into rest, imagine a city reborn from fire, its streets now paved, its laws engraved, its power rising like the morning sun. The Republic had proven resilient, forged through internal struggle and hardened by war. But its true test was still ahead. Across the sea, on the island of Sicily, another power stirred. An ancient rival, a mighty empire. A clash was coming, one that would shake the Mediterranean. But for now, Rome stands tall. No longer a small city on the Tiber, but the beating heart of a growing power. Let your breath slow, your mind soften, and your imagination wander through the hills of Latium and the quiet confidence of a republic on the rise. The winds shift, the waves swell. Rome, still grounded in the soil of Italy, now turns her gaze across the sea to an island called Sicily, fertile, strategic, desired by all, but controlled, in part, by a maritime giant, Carthage, a wealthy trading empire from North Africa, founded by Phoenicians and ruled by merchant princes. Its harbors teemed with ships, its coffers overflowed with silver, and its navy ruled the western Mediterranean. When a band of Italian mercenaries called the Mamertines requested help against Carthaginian and Syracusan forces, Rome faced a choice: intervene and face Carthage head on, or stay home and let another empire shape Sicily's fate. Rome chose action. The First Punic War began. Rome had never been a naval power, but necessity breeds innovation. After capturing a Carthaginian ship, Roman engineers studied it, copied it, and built an entire fleet. Hundreds of vessels, equipped not just with sails, but with a corvus, a boarding ramp that turned sea battles into something Romans knew well: infantry combat. The war dragged on for over 20 years. There were storms, shipwrecks, battles lost and won. But Rome, with its stubborn persistence, prevailed. Carthage surrendered Sicily, the first Roman province outside Italy. But the peace was temporary, always temporary. A generation later, a young Carthaginian general emerged, brilliant, daring, and fueled by vengeance. His name was Hannibal. Thus began the Second Punic War, a conflict so devastating it would come closer than any before or after to extinguishing the Roman Republic. Hannibal did the unthinkable. He marched his army, men, horses, and elephants from Spain across the Alps and into Italy, an audacious, nearly impossible feat. And then he crushed the Romans at Trebia, at Lake Trasimene, and at Cannae, where nearly 50,000 Roman lives were lost in a single day. It was a massacre. But Rome did not surrender. Not then, not ever. Instead, she adapted. General Fabius Maximus avoided direct battle, choosing delay over glory, earning him the nickname the Delayer. Meanwhile, a young commander named Scipio turned Rome's focus outward. He took the fight to Spain, then to North Africa. Hannibal was recalled home, and at the Battle of Zama, Scipio, now known as Africanus, defeated him. Carthage fell to its knees. It lost its navy, its overseas territories, its pride. Rome, once the underdog, now reigned supreme in the Western Mediterranean. But Rome had changed. With each conquest came riches, gold, silver, slaves. The city swelled with wealth and tension. The old values, duty, simplicity, honor, began to fade under the weight of luxury and ambition. Still, Rome marched on. In the east, Rome defeated Macedonia, humbled the Seleucid kings, and eventually claimed Greece itself, not with loud fanfare, but with slow, patient, merciless resolve. And then they turned back to Carthage. Though broken, the old rivals still breathed. Some Roman voices, most famously that of Cato the Elder, insisted, Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed. And so it was. In the Third Punic War, Roman legions besieged the city, set it ablaze, and leveled it to ash. Those who survived were sold into slavery. The rest vanished into history. The year was 146 BCE. Rome now ruled from Spain to Syria, from Gaul to the deserts of Africa. But as you gently drift further into sleep, remember this. Power, once gained, is never easy to control. Inside the Republic, storm clouds gathered, social unrest, political violence, ambitious men rising faster than the system could contain them. The Republic had conquered the world. Now it would have to fight for its soul. By now, Rome had everything except peace. The city that once struggled to defend its hills now governed an empire stretching across continents. But inside the Republic, the seams were beginning to tear. Wealth flowed into Rome like a river, but not evenly. While the elite built lavish villas and dined from silver, small farmers, the backbone of Roman society, were losing their land. The fields they once tilled were now vast estates, worked by slaves from foreign wars. And in the streets of Rome, the poor swelled in number. Tiberius Gracchus was the first to challenge the tide. A tribune of the plebs, he proposed, giving land back to the people. A simple idea, a Roman idea. But the Senate, threatened by change, reacted with fury. In a violent frenzy, Tiberius was clubbed to death, his body thrown into the Tiber. His brother Gaius tried again years later, this time with food subsidies and reforms to help the common people. He too met a bloody end. a chilling message was sent. Reform would be met with violence. From then on, Rome's problems would no longer be solved in debate, but in blood. Generals like Gaius Marius rose to power, not through the Senate, but through the loyalty of their armies. Soldiers began fighting not for the Republic, but for men who promised them land, gold, and glory. Then came Sulla. After a bitter political feud, Sulla marched his legions into Rome itself, the first time a Roman had turned Roman arms against the city. Civil war followed. When the dust settled, Sulla named himself dictator and unleashed a brutal purge of his enemies. The Republic staggered on, wounded and fragile. Then 3 men joined forces, each with ambition to rival the gods. Pompey the Great, a seasoned general with eastern victories. Crassus, the richest man in Rome. And Julius Caesar, charming, cunning, and utterly unstoppable. Together they formed the first triumvirate, an unofficial alliance to control Rome. But alliances, like republics, rarely last. Crassus died in battle. Pompey turned against Caesar. And Caesar crossed the Rubicon. It was a quiet river, narrow and unremarkable, but crossing it with his army was a declaration of civil war. As Caesar's boots touched the other side, he is said to have whispered, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. War swept across Italy, Greece, Egypt. Caesar emerged victorious. He was declared dictator for life. And yet, not all Romans welcomed a king in all but name. On the Ides of March the 15th, senators surrounded him in the Curia. Knives flashed. Caesar fell, bleeding at the feet of a statue of Pompey. Et tu, Brute. The Republic hoped for a reset. Instead, it unraveled further. Caesar's death unleashed another civil war. His heir, Octavian, just 19 years old, joined forces with Mark Antony and Lepidus to avenge him. Together, they formed the Second Triumvirate. Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius, were hunted down and defeated. But once again, ambition outlived unity. Antony, drawn to the east and to Cleopatra of Egypt, broke with Octavian. Their fleets met at the Battle of Actium, a clash not just of ships, but of futures. Octavian won. Antony and Cleopatra, their dreams crumbling, took their own lives. Rome was no longer a republic, but it wasn't yet an empire either. Not officially. As you drift deeper into rest, imagine Octavian, young, calculating, and patient, standing before the Senate. He doesn't demand a crown. He speaks of peace, of restoration. And the Senate, weary from chaos, gives him a title, Augustus. It means the revered one. The Republic is over. The Empire has begun. Breathe deep. The battles have ended. The fires have cooled. And Rome, wounded, weary, begins to heal. Octavian, now called Augustus, does not call himself king. No, that title is far too dangerous. Instead, he becomes princeps, the first citizen, a masterstroke of illusion. He holds the power of a monarch beneath the robes of the Republic, but what he builds is real. He reshapes the Senate, reforms the army, and revives ancient traditions. He settles veterans in distant provinces, not just to reward them, but to weave them into Rome's future. He creates a postal system, a standing police force, and even a firefighting brigade. He famously said he found Rome a city of brick. and left it a city of marble. And he did. Temples rose, roads stretched like veins across the empire. 1,000 towns glowed with Roman order, from the misty hills of Gaul to the desert edge of Syria. This era would be remembered as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. For over 2 centuries, the empire enjoyed an age of stability, unlike any in its past. After Augustus came Tiberius, a capable but distant ruler who withdrew from Rome's public eye. He left much of the work to powerful advisors, some loyal, some less so. Then came Caligula, a man remembered more for madness than governance. Whether the tales are true or twisted by time, his reign ended with his own guards turning against him. But out of chaos rose a surprise. Claudius, awkward, scholarly, overlooked, became emperor. He expanded Rome into Britain and improved the bureaucracy, proof that wisdom sometimes hides behind unlikely faces. His successor, Nero, began with promise, but soon spiraled into tyranny. He played music as Rome burned. He persecuted Christians, and, in the end, abandoned by all, he took his own life, whispering, "What an artist dies in me." The Senate tried to restore order. But Rome spiraled into what would be called the Year of the 4 Emperors. General after general seized power, only to fall to the next. Civil war raged, until one man stood victorious, Vespasian. A soldier, a builder, a pragmatist, he brought back stability, and with his son Titus, construction began on a gift to the people, a grand amphitheater built where Nero's palace once stood. We call it the Colosseum. Under Titus, tragedy struck. Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying Pompeii and Herculaneum in ash, but the emperor's steady compassion made him beloved. He ruled only briefly and was mourned deeply. Then came Domitian, efficient but autocratic, feared more than loved, eventually assassinated by palace insiders. Peace returned with Nerva, an elderly senator who adopted a promising general named Trajan. And with Trajan, Rome reached its greatest size. He conquered Dacia, modern-day Romania, and launched daring campaigns in the east. But he was more than a conqueror. He built libraries, bridges, forums. He was, even centuries later, the emperor against whom all others would be measured. On his deathbed, he may have named his adopted son Hadrian as heir, a traveler, a thinker, a builder of boundaries rather than empires. Hadrian knew that Rome had grown enough. He pulled back from overextended conquests and instead built walls, most famously in Britain, where his namesake wall still stands. He loved Greece, loved art, architecture, philosophy. The Pantheon, still breathtaking today, bears his mark. Its dome, open to the heavens, still stirs the soul. Peace continued under Antoninus Pius, perhaps the most tranquil reign in Roman history. But it was his successor, Marcus Aurelius, who gave the age its heart. A philosopher-emperor, a man who, while waging war on the frontiers, wrote reflections on duty, wisdom, and mortality. His meditations are still read today, quiet thoughts from a ruler who carried the weight of the world with calm dignity. But even golden ages must dim. Marcus Aurelius, breaking with the tradition of adoption, named his biological son as heir. His name was Commodus, and with him, shadows returned to Rome. The death of Marcus Aurelius marked the end of an age and the beginning of unrest. Commodus, his son, his heir, was no philosopher. He saw himself not as a ruler of men, but as a gladiator, a god reborn, a performer on history's grand stage. He renamed Rome after himself. He fought in the arena, never in real danger, but always bathed in glory. He drained the treasury, alienated the Senate, and ruled with whims over wisdom. And then, one winter night, he was strangled in his bath by his wrestling partner, a conspiracy born of fear, desperation, and survival. In his place rose Pertinax, a noble reformer who tried to restore dignity. But the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's own protectors, murdered him within 3 months. They then did the unthinkable, auctioned the empire to the highest bidder. Rome, once ruled by laws and legacies, was now for sale. It could have all fallen apart right there. But in the provinces, a general named Septimius Severus marched on Rome, seized control, and established a new dynasty, one rooted in the army's loyalty, not the Senate's favor. He was a capable soldier, but he brought with him a new reality. Emperors would now rise by sword, not by vote. His advice to his sons on his deathbed was blunt: enrich the soldiers, scorn all others. And so they did. Caracalla, one of those sons, murdered his brother and ruled alone, brutal, paranoid, and unrelenting. Yet he also did something profound. He granted Roman citizenship to nearly every free man in the empire. It was less about generosity, more about taxes, but symbolically, Rome had become a truly universal state. Caracalla, too, was assassinated. And then, like thunder rolling across mountains, chaos spread. In the span of a few decades, emperors came and went in dizzying succession. 26 rulers, most dying violently. It was a time of invasion, inflation, disease, and despair. Borders buckled, cities burned. The empire fractured into breakaway states. In the west, Gaul and Britain declared themselves independent. In the east, the city of Palmyra, led by the indomitable Queen Zenobia, rose in rebellion, a jewel in the desert challenging Rome's crown. And from the north came new threats: Goths, Franks, Alemanni, fierce tribes pushing into imperial lands, taking what they could, testing what remained. Rome trembled, but still, Rome endured. Amid the turmoil, a new figure emerged. Aurelian, a soldier with iron will. He fought back the invaders, reunited the broken provinces, and marched in triumph through Rome with Queen Zenobia in golden chains. He rebuilt the walls around the city, high, thick, and lasting. A silent promise. Rome would not fall. They called him Restitutor Orbis, the restorer of the world. But he too was struck down, betrayed by his own officers. Even in survival, the empire bled. And then, from the distant frontier, came Diocletian. Out of the storm came structure. Diocletian, a soldier from humble roots in the Balkans, took power not with fanfare, but with a clear-eyed understanding of Rome's fragility. The empire was too big, too unwieldy, too dependent on the strength of one man. So Diocletian reimagined everything. He did not divide the empire, not in his mind, but he did something close. He appointed a fellow general, Maximian, to rule the western provinces while he governed the east. Then, to ensure a smooth future, each Augustus appointed a junior emperor, a Caesar, trained to succeed him. 4 rulers, 1 empire. This was the Tetrarchy, the rule of 4. It was an empire of mirrors. 2 capitals in the west, 2 in the east. each with armies, courts, and marble palaces, yet all bound by Roman law, language, and memory. Diocletian reorganized provinces, separated military and civil powers, and tied professions to families. A baker's son would become a baker, a soldier's son a soldier. The empire became more rigid, but more resilient. He reformed the army, the tax system, even the coinage. He built cities, fortresses, roads, walls. And then, one final act, Diocletian retired. He built a palace on the Adriatic coast, where he tended gardens and watched the sea. When asked to return during later turmoil, he famously said, "If you could see my cabbages, you wouldn't ask me to rule again." No emperor had ever stepped down before. But his system did not last. Rivalries emerged, ambition returned, and one name began to rise above the rest. Constantine. He was a general, a tactician, a survivor of civil war. But most of all, he was a visionary. At a critical moment, on the eve of battle against his rival Maxentius, Constantine saw a sign in the sky, a cross of light, and the words, "In this sign, conquer." The next day, he won, and the world changed. He legalized Christianity. He ended the persecutions. He gave the once persecuted faith a place inside the imperial court. Later, he founded a new city, gleaming Eastern and Christian, Constantinople, a second Rome, a capital built on 7 hills, with golden domes and endless walls. The empire was shifting spiritually, politically, and permanently. After Constantine, his sons divided the empire again, and conflict returned. Briefly, his nephew Julian tried to revive the old gods, but died before his dream could take root. And then came Theodosius, the last man to rule both East and West as one. Under his reign, Christianity became the official religion of Rome. Temples were closed, pagan rituals banned. After nearly 1,000 years, Rome's ancient gods fell silent. As you settle deeper into sleep, picture a new Rome rising, not just of marble, but of mosaics, incense, and candlelight. The empire was no longer the same, but it still breathed, still ruled, still remembered. But when Theodosius died, so too did unity. He left the empire to his sons, Arcadius in the east and Honorius in the west. 2 brothers, 2 courts, 1 empire in name, but no longer in truth. The east would survive. The west would soon face its final test. The empire is split. 2 brothers now rule, one in the east from Constantinople, the other in the west from the marshy safety of Ravenna. The Roman world still appears vast, but beneath the surface, the ground is shifting. To the north and east, pressure builds. Nomadic tribes, pushed westward by the Huns, begin to press against Rome's borders. First come the Goths, seeking safety, food, land. Rome grants them refuge, but not kindness. Hunger turns to desperation, desperation to revolt. At the Battle of Adrianople, the Roman army is crushed. An emperor, Valens, is killed, one of the few Roman emperors to fall in battle. It is a warning, one the West does not fully heed. Soon, a new Gothic king rises, Alaric, charismatic, calculated, and deeply aware of Rome's weaknesses. He marches on Italy, and in the year 410 CE, something unthinkable happens. Rome, the eternal city, untouched by foreign hands for 8 centuries, is sacked. 3 days of looting. But far more damaging was the silence that followed. A psychological wound. A question whispered across the empire. Could Rome truly fall? Meanwhile, the Vandals, Suebi, and Alans sweep across Gaul and into Spain. Some eventually cross into North Africa, seizing Carthage, once Rome's rival, now Rome's grain basket. The empire's lifeline is severed. And still, Rome tries to hold on. A Roman general named Flavius Aetius, clever, relentless, unites Roman forces with Visigothic allies to stop the most terrifying enemy yet, Attila the Hun. They meet at the Catalonian plains. The Huns are turned back. Rome, for a brief moment, breathes again. But when Aetius is murdered by the emperor he served, the West loses its last great defender. Soon after, the Vandals, now with ships, sail up the Tiber. They sack Rome a second time. This time it is quiet, methodical, controlled. Not a blaze, but a slow erosion. By now, emperors come and go like shadows. Most are puppets of military strongmen. Some reign for days, others for years, but none hold true power. Not really. The Western Empire is no longer an empire. It is a memory with a title. And then comes the final act. In 476 CE, a Germanic general named Odoacer marches on Ravenna. He deposes the young emperor Romulus Augustulus, a child. He does not kill him. Instead, he sends the imperial regalia, the crown, the purple, to the Eastern emperor in Constantinople with a quiet message. A separate emperor in the West is no longer needed. And just like that, the Western Roman Empire ends. No grand funeral, no last stand, just silence. But the world does not collapse. Roman laws continue under new kings. Roman roads are still walked. Latin is still spoken. Bishops now guide what senators once did. The church, born in the shadows of Roman persecution, becomes the keeper of Roman memory. The Eastern Empire, what we call Byzantium, will endure for another 1,000 years. But in the West, the empire becomes legend. The Western Empire had faded, but in the East, Rome lived on, not in name alone, but in spirit, stone, and law. The people of Constantinople never called themselves Byzantines. That's a name given by later historians. To themselves, they were simply Romans, heirs to Augustus, protectors of Caesar's dream, defenders of Christendom. Constantinople stood like a lighthouse between worlds, perched between Europe and Asia, watching over the Bosporus like a jewel set in marble. It was a city of golden domes and soaring walls, bustling markets and candlelit churches. And under Emperor Justinian I, it rose to new heights. Justinian dreamed of reuniting the Roman world. He sent his general Belisarius west to reclaim North Africa from the Vandals, then to Italy, where Gothic resistance crumbled slowly, painfully over 2 decades. He rebuilt Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom, its vast dome floating above worshippers like the heavens made stone. It still stands today, echoing with whispers of empire. And he gave the world a gift more enduring than conquest, the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law, a vast legal code that would shape Europe for centuries to come. But even as the Eastern Empire glowed with revival, new winds were stirring. From the Arabian deserts came the rise of Islam, swift, inspired, and determined. Within a generation, Roman provinces in Syria, Egypt, and North Africa were lost. The empire shrank, but it survived. It reorganized itself, adopted new systems. Greek became its language. The emperor now ruled not only as a sovereign, but as God's chosen steward on earth. Centuries passed. There were triumphs, victories under Basil the Bulgar Slayer, the Macedonian renaissance of art and literature, the defense of Constantinople using the searing mystery of Greek fire. And there were heartbreaks, the crushing defeat at Manzikert, the loss of Anatolia, and the shocking betrayal of the Fourth Crusade, when Christian knights, instead of marching to the Holy Land, turned their swords on Constantinople itself. The city fell not to Muslims, but to fellow Christians, looted and desecrated in 1204. It was a wound, but not a death. The Byzantines reclaimed their city, rebuilt, endured, until 1453. A young sultan named Mehmed II, commanding a vast Ottoman army, set his eyes on Constantinople. He surrounded it with cannons, weapons that could tear through walls once thought eternal. For 7 weeks, the city held. But on May 29th, as dawn broke and the final assault began, the city's last emperor, Constantine XI, is said to have cast off his robes, drawn his sword, and vanished into the final fight. The walls were breached, the city was taken. The Roman Empire, after 1,480 years, was gone. But its legacy, still very much alive. As your breath slows and your thoughts drift, think of what Rome left behind, not just in ruins or relics, but in the very rhythms of our modern lives. In law, where courts still echo Roman principles. In language, where Latin lives on. In Spanish, French, Italian, and more. In architecture, arches, domes, forums, still shaping skylines around the world. In religion, where Roman roads once carried the early Christians, and Roman structure carried the church itself. In the dream of unity, a single people under law, not born of blood, but of belonging. Even now, when we speak of republics, of citizens, of rights and duties, we speak the language of Rome. And so, as you settle into sleep, let your imagination wander down Roman roads, through marble halls and starlit forums, past emperors and philosophers, senators and sculptors, soldiers and saints. The city may have fallen, but Rome never truly did. It lives on, in stone, in story, and in you. Thank you for listening. Sleep well, and may the eternal city keep watch over your dreams. If you made it this far without falling asleep, smash that like button, subscribe, and join us for more wild rides through history. Rome wasn't built in a day, but this channel, it's growing fast. Be part of the empire.